Okay, hello and welcome to my presentation on cell phones and personal devices in the classroom. I'm going to go ahead and full screen here so you can see. As I'm sure all of you know, as educators, the question of cell phones in the classroom is a recent issue, perhaps, the last 20 years or so, but definitely by now a ubiquitous one. Especially where I teach in Johnson County, it seems like every student has a smartphone in their hand at all times, and they're glued to their screen constantly. As a result, many school districts across the nation have taken drastic measures to ban cell phones from school grounds completely, like Blue Valley North did when I was attending there 10 years ago, while other schools have attempted to incorporate the use of cell phones within the classroom, like the Blue Valley School District does now. It's very interesting to see the changes that have come over time as smartphones have become more ubiquitous and more essential to everyday life. School district policies, it seems, have become more lax and lenient in attempting to restrict them. Teachers and building administrators need to be aware of the legal implications of cell phone confiscation policies when the cell phone is being used too often and in inappropriate settings, as well as the use of personal devices both on and off school grounds, as there's a lot of legal implications related to these devices. So let's dive in. A couple of facts about cell phones. This is not an issue that's going to go away as much as we want to pretend it will or want to try to make it go away. I think cell phone outright bans of the devices are not going to work out because these are the numbers, right? About 60% of students in grades 6 through 12 think they're using their own phones would improve technology at the school. 78% of students with smartphones think that using those devices would improve technology at their school. There's definitely a shift towards technology in education. 67% of students in grades 9 through 12 have access to an internet-enabled phone, and 62% of parents would buy a mobile device for their child's educational use. So there's definitely a big trend and a push towards allowing students to not only have their cell phones in school, but to use them for an educational purpose. And I think with the trends in education, this is the way things are headed. So we as educators, building administrators, and teachers, whatever, need to be aware of not only the problems and the potential legal implications this creates, but also some of the opportunities we have to be able to make cell phone usage in schools efficient and for a productive purpose. Now, for most school districts, there is no federal policy about cell phone confiscation in schools. It's up to the school district and to the local school boards, but they need to make sure that they are staying within the bounds of the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, except when instigated on a warrant based on probable cause. So this is, when it was designed as part of the Bill of Rights, the purpose of this amendment is to protect citizens from having their property confiscated unfairly and their stuff taken away by the police, by the government, without a probable cause, meaning that there is a reasonable suspicion that there's a crime being committed or about to be committed. In terms of education, in the educational setting, we know that with regards to some of the First Amendment, some of the Bill of Rights Amendment rights that all Americans enjoy, some of those rights can be limited and curtailed within an educational setting, and the same is true of the Fourth Amendment. Based on a 1969 Supreme Court case known as New Jersey versus TLO, students' Fourth Amendment rights were determined to be limited at in a school setting, meaning that building administrators do not need a warrant to search a student if there is a reasonable suspicion of misconduct. In the case of New Jersey versus TLO, what had happened was a student was caught smoking in the bathroom by a principal, and the principal suspected that this particular student had marijuana and supplies to make and distribute marijuana in her purse. So the principal conducted a search of the purse, found the paraphernalia he was looking for, and the student was then prosecuted for distribution of drugs. And the Supreme Court ruled that the building principal had the right to conduct that search without a warrant because there was a reasonable suspicion of misconduct on the part of the student. And since 1969, this has been the landmark case of the Supreme Court that has determined many Fourth Amendment questions in the educational setting about whether or not building administrators can search a student. This, not only applies to drugs and crime, but it also applies to the use of cell phones. So since TLO, many building administrators have taken this to mean have been able to have confiscated and searched student cell phones in order to find evidence of malfeasance and of crimes. The court does not always support these searches, depending on it all depends on whether or not the suspicion was deemed reasonable or not. For example, one student's phone was searched for evidence of marijuana use, and the court determined that there's no way to find drugs on a phone, and so the phones should not have been searched, and the court sided in favor of the student. So as building administrators and educators, we need to be really careful about conducting a search of a student's cell phone, looking through text messages, looking through pictures or social media posts on a student's phone after confiscation, unless there is a reasonable suspicion. We have to be kind of aware of what reasonable suspicion means and what the courts have kind of determined that to mean since TLO. It's not like you can just search a student's cell phone every time you catch them texting in class. You want to get them, in trouble or something like that. You got to be sure that you have a reasonable suspicion that something, a crime is being committed, or that there's a reasonable danger to the school and to the safety of the classroom environment. A more recent Supreme Court landmark case, Riley versus California, which was decided just 5 years ago, has kind of amended TLO. It doesn't apply particularly to the schools just yet, but the legal implications and the precedent that it sets could soon be showing up in cases related to searches and seizures of student cell phones. What happened in this particular case, Riley versus California, is a young man, Riley, was arrested in 2009 under suspicion of gang activity and drug paraphernalia. His cell phone was searched, and evidence was found on the phone that seemed to confirm that this person was indeed a member of a gang that had ties to the drug trade, and the young man was arrested and prosecuted. Under Riley versus California, the Supreme Court reversed the court's ruling and said that cell phones they represent a much greater potential source of information than a wallet or a purse for a search. And so cell phones cannot be searched in most cases without a warrant. There are some cases that the court noted with extreme emergency or mostly extreme emergency, that a cell phone cannot be searched without a warrant. And of course, this does not overturn New Jersey versus TLO, as this applies outside of the realm of education. But certainly, this legal precedent is a problem area for building administrators who want to continue to conduct cell phone searches under the previous ruling in TLO. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit and talk about some of the potential legal implications of personal device use on school grounds. I wanted to give a personal example. Recently, so in the Blue Valley School District where I am, we are at a one-to-one or one-to-learner initiative where all the students have been issued MacBooks from the school district for educational purpose. Recently, within the last few weeks, I had an 11th grade student in my classroom who used his school-issued MacBook in class to search for videos online of how to make a pipe bomb. Now, this kid was, for lack of a better word, an idiot. He was trying to impress his friends. He was foolishly trying to show off and kind of be funny. When I was told about the situation, I did not get the sense that this kid was serious about actually wanting to make a pipe bomb and bring it to school. But nevertheless, he was, because it's a school-issued MacBook device, he was called the administrator's office and questioned within minutes, as he should be, because this represents a clear and present danger to the school environment. The student in question, and all students who agree to take the MacBooks home and to use them in the educational setting, sign a fair use agreement, and they have to take all these courses and training on proper internet usage. So the student knew what he was doing was inappropriate and foolish, and he was punished accordingly. The question remains, what if the student was at home when he searched for something potentially dangerous on the school-issued laptop? Well, the answer there would be still, under the fair use agreement, if you're using a school-issued device, you need to be using the device appropriately within the confines of the fair use agreement, which raises the question, what about if you're using a personal device or cell phone and you're posting things that are inappropriate or potentially violent or dangerous? For the most part, building administrators do not have control about what students post on social media or how they're using their personal devices outside of the school, unless there's a threat of violence. For example, if a student claims to be, wanting to build a pipe bomb or bring a gun to school, things like that, or the potential for a substantial and material disruption to school proceedings. Now, what this has been determined to mean is a recent case. For example, a student wrote a sexually explicit song about a teacher at the school, posted it online, and the song was being played at the school building. That was determined to be inappropriate, and the student was punished for that inappropriate use of the internet. The question here is a First Amendment question about personal devices, about limiting student devices outside of school grounds. It's kind of a sticky question that there hasn't been many cases on, but for the most part, the school control over what is posted and what is shared outside of school grounds is limited, which, many building administrators are okay with, others not so much. It kind of feels to me like a big brother sort of thing. We don't want to be watching and monitoring these students at all times. But at the same time, building administrators need to be aware of what is being posted online with regards to the school, and be aware of these potential for substantial material disruptions to school process or the threat of violence. Okay, some discussion questions for you to consider, and I think, and I can't remember if you need to reply to these in the post, but there's definitely issues that will affect you if you want to become a building leader. So there are things that you need to be thinking about, and I'll give you my own answers here so you can kind of jumpstart your thinking. But first off, you need to know, what is your school or district policy on the use of cell phones and personal devices in the classroom? Personally, our school district is a little bit decentralized, a little scatterbrained here on what our policy is about cell phones in the classroom, which was not always the case. When cell phones first became a disruptive issue, the policy was very strict. If you were caught texting, if you were caught on your phone in the classroom, the phone was confiscated and returned, and you had to come back to the school and pick it up from a principal. Often you had to bring your parents too. So it's a very strict, almost draconian policy. Now the policy is very decentralized. It's essentially each teacher for themselves. We have a school policy that our student council helped to write recently, but I know for a fact not many teachers follow it, because some teachers use classroom devices or use cell phones in the educational process. Others don't. Other teachers, like myself, I just don't want to be bothered with having to take phones all the time, because that's not why I got into education. The potential legal actions that are opened up by these cell phone confiscation policies, one that we've had in the past in the Blue Valley School District is occasionally a student's cell phone has been confiscated, and it'll break when it's dropped or something, the screen cracks, and the teacher is then held legally liable for that device. So that's something you need to be aware of. If you're going to be confiscating cell phones, you need to have a policy and a plan in place. And to combat that, our school we have these little pouches that we have students put their cell phone in, like when they're taking a test. Some teachers just have them put the cell phones into the pouch as soon as they walk into the classroom, which is less liable to fall out and break. But still, whenever there is a cell phone where the cell phone is taken out of the hands of the student and into your own hands, that's a problem.
It's Jaylee and John.